Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 179. And this is my version of the collared shirt. And Adam's got his version of the collared shirt on today. Occasionally, we have to dress up for certain clients.
It's ridiculous. So I have a jacket too, Gary. It's ridiculous.
Oh, man. You had a jacket too?
Yeah.
I saw Jeff Klein with a tie on, and I thought,
what is happening around here?
I showed up to school and I'm naked, So anyway, this is going to be a fun day because we're going to talk about the ways that you can triple the value of your business and the 7 deadly sins of value creation. We've talked about some of these in the past, but Adam has an ebook out on those very things, which is really cool. And Jack and I were together yesterday at the Shoemaker clay shoot at Frank Harrison's place, Meadowbrook, I think is what it's called, or something like that, down in
Meadowwood.
Oh, Meadowwood.
Yeah.
Wow, what a cool place that was. And it didn't help my shooting any better. It's kind of like golf. I feel good if I hit 25% of them, so it was kind of that way. But it was a really cool thing, raising money for Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is really cool. I got that right, didn't I,
Yes.
Jack?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, cool. Anyway, so we will still deal with any of the questions that you may have, topics you want to cover. I mean, after 179 weeks, you guys know the drill. You can chat us up on the chat and harass us there. Papa Joe's been a little quiet lately, so I'm kind of missing some of that harassment. But hit us up with Q&A. Happy to answer your questions. And, I think, Jack, you had some current events that you wanted to cover before we went into it. So the floor is yours.
Yeah. So I've been getting this a little bit from people who just want the Cliff Notes version of what's been going on over the past 48 hours in the Capitol. So I found a good article that sums it up pretty well. The magic number for the day or for the week is 217. That is the number of votes that is needed to permanently put someone into the speaker position. So what has happened over the past couple of days? So the GOP put Scalise. It's Scalise, right? It's not Scalise. Scalise. It's Scalise. Okay.
Yes.
I started getting Italian-ish, putting the vowel on the end. All right, Scalise. So nominated during a secret ballot on Wednesday, beating out Jordan 113 to 99. So again, 217 is the number. So there is a lot of speculation as to whether it's ever going to happen for him. The House recessed at 3 p.m. yesterday, which is a procedural step, and now there's a scramble for votes. So Scalise is trying to get up to 217 from the 113. So flipping up those votes. If Scalise becomes speaker, then the majority leader role is vacant, so you have people vying to be in that kind of second chair essentially, and there are people that are bidding for that. What is interesting is that Jordan, even though he's a competitor to Scalise, has backed Scalise, or at least said that he would vote for him if he was there, up for election or appointment. And then there's at least 20 members ready to not vote for Scalise on the floor. So, and they gave some names of who those people are. So it very much is an uphill battle. Oh, and then I think that the last is that nothing is going to happen until about 54 minutes from now, apparently. So at noon is when the party starts again. So
yeah, it's terrible to watch, and I definitely, in terms of what's happening in the Middle East, it really sucks. That said, I could not resist the humor of the situation. I just think hey man, anytime I kind of get pissed off about how much the Boatsman family spends and how many people are hitting my bank account, I just switch banks. Problem gets solved, you know. We got you want to conserve cash at work, just not paying your bills and pay whoever screams the loudest, you know, like I'm not advocating what happened, but at the same time, wow, what a fabulous way to spend less money. I mean, in all seriousness, you know, they say that it actually costs a lot more to have a shutdown than it does save, but still, it's like so interesting, you know?
Yeah. It still chaps me that the lawmakers that are creating the chaos and the circus are the ones that continue to get paid and vote in their own pay raises on our money. Yeah, it's our money. So
Yeah.
they're supposed to be representing us. So they haven't gotten that memo, or they've forgotten that, you know, which is a really sad thing. You know, it's one more little comment. This is kind of funny. So I roll into the parking garage today and there are fire trucks everywhere in our building. And I'm like, did somebody think that they needed to pull the fire alarm in order to get out the door? I don't know. That may have happened. That did happen in Congress, just so you know. A congressman, somebody that was elected, thought pulling a fire alarm would actually open a door.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I've
So
heard that
anyway,
also
enough about
happens.
that.
That also happens in female dorms on campuses when guys need to get out, is that they pull the alarms and sneak out, because then you just don't, you know, it just creates chaos. So I've heard. So.
It's funny. I've done a lot of really bad stuff in my life, Jack, but even I haven't heard of that.
I've never-
So I feel like
no.
it's probably a story.
I will tell you that I have never personally done that, but I know people who have done that.
Gosh.
Okay, I thought you were just asking for a friend, you know, just
All right,
No.
so I do have a funny story I got to tell before we go into the 7 deadly sins. So this happened at Forest Hill Church when I was the drummer there before we left for the Great White North of Cleveland. And so we're and we played a couple services per Sunday, and I think it was in the second or first service, I don't remember. And we're playing and the alarms go off, and it's probably got, I don't know, 1,500 people in there, you know, and so it's just blaring. Wah, wah, wah. And so I'm looking at the band director, like, what do we do? And he's like, just keep going. So everybody's filing out, and it's kind of like, you know, the Titanic, I guess, you know, like we're playing. And so then finally everybody's out. It's blaring like crazy. So we finally go out, and a guy named Gary Morris, who is a bass player, he's a big guy, and he's got a 3-year-old under his arm, and he goes, I'm going to kill him. And I go, what? And it's his little 3-year-old. He had stacked up boxes and pulled the fire alarm. And it was like 3 fire trucks there. He thought that was great. It was a funny experience.
Yeah,
So anyway,
I wanted to do touch truck. All right, so you ready to hop in?
let's
Gary?
go into it. Let's go into how do we
Yeah.
triple the value of a company.
Yeah. So we've shared, you know, kind of the slide before, but we thought we'd revisit, kind of go a little bit deeper dive. We may not get through all the items, in which case we'll have a great topic for next week, Gary. But
There you go.
I think, you know, in the theme of, hey, we're trying to get ready for next year, you know, as you're thinking through what's the kind of stuff that I should be working on, the items that we're about to cover off would be fabulous candidates, you know, for items to be working on. So, you know, these aren't in any particular order of importance, other than the first one is the most important, period, which I'm about to cover off on. And then I'm going to let Jack take the second one, because it's right up his alley. But the first one is, you know, I have poor or unreliable financial records. You know, I mean, oh, sure, that's kind of shameless coming from a CPA firm. Of course you would say that. Whatever, you know, go ahead. Don't listen to the advice. Go do a transaction and see how the diligence goes. That's what I have to say about your crap ass financial records. You know, independent of like anything else that someone might say around like, yeah, I'd love to lend the guy money. I can't rely on his team to produce financial statements to save their ass. Like this costs so much more than just value. It damages your credibility. And what do we mean, in terms of, hey, I can produce, good financial statements. It really comes down to the stuff that Gary's my client, the stuff that Gary is looking at internally to make decisions, A, no more than 30 to 60 days in arrears, B,
Yeah.
it should be pretty damn close to what I'm giving him back in a tax return. Meaning like the only adjustments that I should be making as the CPA firm are adjustments that are for tax purposes only, or alternatively, he's like, hey, that's really cool that, Gap said that was a good idea, but it's completely nonsensical in terms of how I run my financial statements. But I understand the translation, in other words, like his bank accounts are reconciled, the debt's right, leases are, equipment's capitalized, Gary's tax distributions aren't sitting on the P&L, they're real, real financial statements that I could say, yep, that's pretty accurate representation of what happened around here. Man, if you can't produce that, like when you're out at the country club with your buddy, man, it's so cool that I just sold my company for 10 times revenue. You ought to be able to get that too, Jack. Don't even ask for that about that unless you can do this step, because you're automatic 3 times EBITDA. I've never seen a company that couldn't produce financial records do better than a 3 times EBITDA. So I know that was really loud, but start there. And what I'd love to hear from Jack on this item number 1 is, just kind of war story about, hey man, we're in the middle of a transaction and this is what came up, related to this topic. Cause I know you got him. I've been on some of the calls.
Yeah, I mean, it is, you try to advise clients that, okay, and we have these discussions all the time, which is have your stuff in order and, no surprises, because, they will find those things and they will ask about them. And so know your stuff and have it organized so that, and it's okay that there may be a problem, but have an explanation for what that is. Why are you booking it this way? What does this mean? Wait a minute. What, why are ratios off? I mean, just have the explanation ready, but it's inevitable that once people start, getting into doing the due diligence into the financials, that those questions are going to come up. And there is, for me, if I'm on the seller side, well, either side, many times it's a direct dollar for dollar or close to it adjustment based on the problem. So you quantify it, and then you have either in the form of a holdback or in the form of something that is a potential set off. Talk about working capital issues. And, as you said, we've been through together some of them, and it's okay. Well, one of the most important things that you do in a transaction, and I think you should do, during normal business operations, is understanding your working capital number and what the components of that working capital number are, because while it's somewhat standard, there is some subjectivity as to whether or not this should be in the formula or not in the formula. So one of the first things that I do when we're talking about a working capital adjustment is, even in the LOI, is what is the formula, so that we don't have this issue. Or in the asset purchase agreement, if it's going to be signed earlier than later, meaning a sign then close versus a sign and close simultaneously, that be very clear, because you don't want to have those discussions on, just prior to closing and say, well, why is this in there? Why is that in there? So that's a long-winded way of saying, yes, absolutely. I totally agree that, this is paramount in being successful moving forward is knowing all of that and just, knowing your books. I mean, what else is there to say?
So I got a question for you, Jack. You've been helping people with transactions for quite some time, correct? How long has that been?
A quarter of a century, about.
Okay, so 25 years you've been helping
Plus.
people with transactions, and I'm
Yeah.
assuming that a lot of those are sell side transactions, right?
Yeah, many of them, but I mean, we buy stuff too.
Yeah. So probably, if it's like me, probably majority are sell side transactions. Is that a fair assessment?
It's a healthy mix, but I think yes. Yeah.
So in your 25-year history of greater than 50% of your transaction time being spent on sell side transactions, this sounded like a deposition. I would like to know how many times, as the result of the buyer side doing due diligence, did they say, "Oh my God, Gary, we found a mistake in your financial transactions. This is so much better than we thought. Here's more money."
And then the seller woke up from that dream, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be very nice if that were actually to ever happen, because then I would probably leverage off of the fact that, okay, now it becomes a contingency fee and maybe a more success fee based on the purchase price that is increased because of that, right? So no, I mean, obviously the exact opposite is the truth, which is they're always looking for something to assign a deduct to the purchase price or put more weight on you and say, okay, we understand that there's this issue, bad debt, or your receivables are higher, or your inventory costs, or whatever it may be. And you may, so yeah, and that's my job as, buyer's counsel, is to assist with putting as much risk on the other party. That a contract at its fundamental function is to, obviously, to what are the deal terms, indemnification, that kind of thing. But even in indemnification, its fundamental purpose is to assign liability and risk to one party or the other. And it's just and again, fundamental negotiations between a buyer and seller is to put the risk one place or another. In your normal business operations, when you're signing a contract, okay, if you get to the boilerplate and are paying attention outside of the deal terms and who's paying what and delivery terms and those kind of things, it is who is responsible for when bad things happen, whether there's a shipping delay, whether product is destroyed, whether there's a fire in the building that is caused by the product that is flammable. If something happens to it, not in its residing state or static state, but if something is mixed together. So those kind of things, yeah, it's just an assignment of risk. So yeah, that's my job as buyer's counsel. As seller's counsel is, make sure that before you open yourself up to that due diligence and you start putting those documents in that data room, that you know what you're putting in there and you know what to expect. It's like any litigator would tell you that when they ask questions, they know the answer already. They should not, and most do not, ask questions without knowing what the possible answers are to those questions, whether it's your own client that you're deposing or on the witness stand, or if it is the other party, because you're leading the other party in a certain, when you're doing cross-examination, what the lawyer is doing is leading the other party to get to a certain conclusion and trying to Jedi mind trick them into saying something that they shouldn't say. Essentially, I shouldn't say that, that's mean, but that's what it is, really.
Confessions of a lawyer.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah, no, I mean, I'll close the point on this is that, even in the best of circumstances, meaning like their financial statements are bulletproof, and you know what, they're in the top 10 of best CFO/controllers that we work with is BGW. Like you've hit the pantheon, of we love you, you're our hero. Will you train the rest of our clients? Even in those scenarios, something comes up in the due diligence where the buying side is trying to negotiate a discount for some thing they found upon financial review. So, and that's with people that are generally bulletproof. Man, it's a lot better when your stuff's unassailable, meaning like, hey, that's really interesting, but you're an idiot. It doesn't actually say that. You misinterpret it. You're a bozo and nobody would ever agree with you. And why do you even have this job? Like, it's way better to be able to say that, or, oh, you have some more information? Thunk. There's the backup for the buy. Like, it's way better to be in that scenario than the, oh, I don't know. Yeah. Geez, let me go do some digging on. Like, it just, anyway, don't do it. If you take one thing away, fix that in 2024. So moving on to the next topic.
Oh,
Jack,
wait.
Go ahead.
Before we move on to the next topic, Derek Painter weighed in and said, speaking as a banker, I couldn't agree more. We're walking that walk together right now on a deal.
Yeah.
So there you go.
All right. So the next one is, your intellectual property is not owned by you or is not transferable. And I think there's kind of a subset of this topic, which is called, I have distribution rights to a something.
Yeah, that's a good one. So it's many times the agreements that you have a trademark license or intellectual property license built into them, because you're essentially using someone else's property, whether it's in the distribution channel, you as a wholesaler, retailer, whatever it may be. But it's a whole separate section on a due diligence checklist as to tell us about your intellectual property. Tell us, I mean, this is how detailed it gets. We understand that you manufacture things. We understand that your manufacturing process is out of the country. Show us the agreements with your third-party manufacturing providers and their own employees for production of this stuff, because we don't want to, and let's say it's maybe somewhat a patented something, okay, or has some value in its construction, in its design. So when we are looking at businesses and there is this process that's outside of the country, we want to make sure that there is not some random person in some country that's going to say, you owe me royalties because I was the one who modified this process so that way you could sell something that is more valuable in the US. And so it can get that granular, but on a more fundamental level, it is want to make sure that when you put something out there and it's under a trademark, it is under a brand, that that no one is going to attempt to come after us as the buyers for this. And so and we've talked about this before, a significant presumption, and it's a valid, meaning I understand the thought behind it or why it kind of seems logical, but it isn't the way the law works. That just because you have the name filed with the Secretary of State and you've been using it for a period of time does not ensure that you have the intellectual property rights to that name, to that brand. That's why you need to supplement it with a federal trademark registration. Yes, there is this concept of common law rights, but I would say, those really don't come into play unless it's something that you've been doing in your community for several decades, and then a newcomer tries to come in and use that name, and then there's confusion. So, I mean, we could do a whole hour on trademark stuff, but to kind of summarize that, yes. And I would say that over the past 15 years or so, as more people are involved in electronic commerce and those kind of things, that having that intellectual property protection has value. There was a time decades ago where banks looked at your intellectual property rights, your trademark registration, and did not put very much value on that. It's an intangible. Okay. They are going to lend you money on sure things, your inventory, your receivables, all those things that they can hold on to as collateral. And this, nebulous thing of intellectual property rights, okay, we're not going to, lend you because there's no asset value associated with that. I mean, the complete opposite of that today. Now, if all you have is intellectual property, you're not going to get a loan, but it is a key component because the lenders are banking literally on you having those rights in order to continue on with your business. So we do a lot of checking on that. And on the reverse side, when we're advising sellers, it is, okay, tell us about what have you done? And that is also cybersecurity and privacy and what you've done to protect your business, but also the e-commerce that's going on, credit card transactions, those kind of things. What have you put in place so that don't find out that the buyer doesn't find out a year down the road after they've been operating this business that there was a security breach right before they bought the business. But, and people aren't going to say, well, that was them and this is us now. It's all, it's the brand, and you're going to get tarnished by that. So again, long-winded way of saying, yes, IP rights are very significant on both sides. And so you got to have that in order.
Yeah. So I guess related, Jack, if you could I think the more common scenario that we find independent of the intellectual property rights is, we have a lot of clients that are distributors that have exclusive agreements, but those exclusive agreements are typically like cancelable at any moment, by the OEM, and the OEM really controls the pricing and doesn't have a whole lot of, and also to some extent can, control what I can sell it for, based on I cannot go below or, whatever, the case may be. Can you kind of share like what can those people do to protect themselves in this type of category to show that they otherwise, have some value in those contracts?
Yeah. So it is, part of it is you need to negotiate as long a contract as possible. Short of doing that, and yes, I mean, the manufacturers have a lot of power and a lot of ability to cut you out. So the next best thing that you can do is have a long enough runway before they can do that. And if they are forcing you completely out of their system, then have certain buyback rights so that you're not stuck with certain inventory. The worst position you can be in is having inventory that you really can't do anything with, because you don't have the license to sell it anymore. And then you're kind of stuck with it. And then, what are you going to do? And a lot of times, if you're not paying attention, what will happen is you have to sell it to your successor that they have appointed to be the distributor in your geography, or to a neighboring or to someone else at a discount. So negotiating the terms of your ejection from the system essentially is the next best thing that you can do to protect yourself in that event. But there is similarly there, and I look at this, and the reason why I'm thinking about this is I just drafted an employment agreement. An employment agreement typically has 3 of the 4 squares that I'm about to describe to you. And many times I insert the 4th square. The first 2 squares are termination by the employer for cause and termination without cause. And then you have the resignation, 3rd block. The 4th block, which is missing in many employment agreements, is termination for good reason, or I'm sorry, resignation for good reason, which is basically termination for cause by the employee. So you are told and promised that you're not going to have to move out of the Charlotte metro area. You're promised that you're not going to have to travel more than a certain amount of days. These are your duties, the terms and conditions. So the analogy is to have that fourth box into the contract, that if they don't have good reason to remove you, or if you have good reason to leave, and whatever the terms and conditions are, like let's say that they promised a certain volume of products for you to be able to sell or distribute, and then that doesn't come to fruition. You know, they're going to say, well, okay, supply chain issues, all these other, you know, they're going to try to blame other things. But I mean, regardless, it is, they're not living up to their promise, and that's their problem with their suppliers. So negotiating that into the contract. So having that fourth block in those types of agreements it would be obviously enormously helpful, but you're going to encounter a lot of resistance from that, because they want to maintain a lot of control, and they want not give you any power to say, you guys screwed this up, so I'm out, beyond the core fundamental terms of the contract. So that would be, the next best way to kind of protect yourself in those circumstances. Does that make sense? That was a lot. I think I kind of went around in a circle, but
I hadn't thought of that fourth quadrant, though. That's a very interesting thought. I mean, the bottom line is, if you are buttoned up in these two areas, whether you're wanting to sell or not, you're going to have peace of mind so that you aren't going to get hit with the gotcha. And then secondly, you're prepared so that if an opportunity knocks, like what happened with Renee Brasier, I think I mentioned it last week, but I thought it was really interesting. She wasn't ever looking to sell, but because she had moved to what she called certified financial statements. So I don't know if she went with full audits or reviewed financial statements, but she said certified. So, but she did that because she wanted to have it buttoned up. And again, she wasn't planning on selling it, but somebody knocked and she just jacked up the price so high that she thought they would for sure say no. And they didn't. They said yes. and she said in the podcast, that'll be, next month, I think, when we release it, that was a huge reason that it accelerated. It went through so fast because she had her stuff together.
There's definitely a psychological impact on buyers and buyers counsel when a seller has their act together and knows their stuff. And as we find weaknesses in the armor, that they can explain that and very easily. And the sincerity of being prepared goes a long way in a negotiation. So to your point, I've also experienced people that have clients that they weren't on the market, but they sold, and it was just, they threw a number out there just to, okay, what if I win the lottery kind of thing. And they won the lottery from their perspective in their business, because they were able to, and I said, you caused this to happen for yourself by your financial discipline and being ready. I will say in the most recent instance, they were kind of nudged in that direction because they were thinking about selling, and then it kind of like it didn't work out. And I think it was because the next generation of children decided, they initially said, yeah, we don't want to be part of the business. And then they kind of got pulled into the business. There was a family circumstance, a death in the family actually, and got pulled into it. And they're like, okay, so they were already down that path. So I don't want to say that, okay, it was all on their doing voluntarily. It should have been, but they didn't get very far in that process, but they continued on with it through their discipline as if they were going to sell. They didn't sell at that time, but yeah, what an opportunity. So, if nothing else, hopefully, us telling these stories encourages you, because, we all have such free time to be doing these things, to get your back office in order. And you just got to bite the bullet and do it. And, you'll be much better for it, because once you get through the sludge of doing it, and then it just becomes additive and kind of a marginal amount of time, if the foundation is set up properly. That, we just, all of us see, if you haven't gone through it, you see getting to that foundation as being insurmountable, and then you convince yourself, yeah, okay, it's more important for me to deal with the operational aspects of the day rather than investing the time in building this thing and formulating this foundation properly, or at least making the optics match that. And I'm not suggesting that you mask things. I'm just saying that, okay, if you have it in order, but maybe it doesn't look as sexy as it should because you're using pencils with green bar paper. And that's a real life example from about a year ago that I was dealing with an older opposing counsel, and he was using a pencil and doing math, in 7-digit math, on paper. And I pulled out my phone and I'm like, we should be using, a device called the calculator. And I didn't say it that sarcastically, but I was like, and he was pretty good. I mean, he got it mostly right, but I mean, okay, we're talking about an significant asset purchase transaction. It was a car dealership. Just okay is not okay. It needs to be accurate. And in fact, after we did the calculator thing, I'm like, we're putting all these numbers on a spreadsheet, because Excel is a pretty good thing to use in these kind of situations. So, but yes, getting
You're
it
asking
to
a
the right
lot
place.
from a car dealer, though, man. They're used to doing this thing, and then they slide it over.
Yeah.
You're getting behavior change there. That's asking a lot there, Jack. Hey,
Yeah.
before we move on to number 3, it's probably not in here, but something to think about, because we've seen this multiple times, and it might make it easier to deal with some of this stuff. And that is, think about what you're running to instead of what you're running from. So the folks, it's a very tragic thing that I think we've seen multiple times, where somebody sells their company and then they're just kind of like, what's it going to take to sell this car lot today, sir? Derek, you're funny. Yeah, exactly. Here, let me put this, anyway, but start dreaming about what you would like to run to, because when all of a sudden you don't have your identity wrapped up in it as founder, as CEO, as whatever, King Poobah, where everybody bows to you or whatever, or you just love your team and you no longer have it, what are you going to run to? So mindset.
Yeah, that's actually a fabulous segue. I don't know if you planned that, but
I did not.
The next one is too much dependence upon the owner, and with meaning like, you are the business as the owner. And I mean, that could be, that could be a 5-man shop, that could be a 500-man shop. The same kind of conditions apply. And I think, this is a funny one, because it's where, your actions should be able to align with your story. So generally people that are leading a balanced life, that have something to move towards, actually can demonstrate that the business isn't dependent upon them, because they're already, living elements of that life that they plan on leading. Whereas people that haven't done that, maybe they want to, maybe they have something, but not so much. So, on this one, what would be my evidential test? It's, well, how much vacation did you take last year? Like in other words, like part of our tagline is, make money, save money, stay out of trouble, have fun. This would be the have fun portion of it, meaning like, the business to me is fun because I do enjoy it, but I also, part of the reason why I enjoy it is because I have time to go do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Like it's done, like I don't have a lot of headaches anymore. So, I think yet every, again, going back to Jack's 25 years, doing over 50% sell side M&A, how many sellers woke up as part of the transaction and said, you know what I want to do, Gary? I want to sell the majority of my company, take a minority stake in the new company, have a significant earnout, and work for some jackass for 10 years. That sounds fabulous. Please. Like, did you hear that a lot, Jack, in your dealings?
You know, surprisingly, not so much. Yeah, I totally agree. And I was thinking as you guys were saying, running towards and not away from things, in both contexts. So we've obviously been talking about M&A, transition, exit strategy, exit planning, succession planning, but also the operational aspects of it. And I think this applies to that in this way, which is the best scenario for a seller and for a buyer is when whatever trajectory the seller was going on and the vision that he or she had moving forward aligns with the buyer's desires of what they want to do. And whether it is growth, I mean, yeah, you're going to have in investor that are buying businesses and it's going to continue on. But, you know, the strategic purchases and sales is fantastic. But also think about it in your everyday business. And this has also come up as we're looking, you know, we're constantly, I shouldn't say constantly, we've been very fortunate that we have a very good, strong office and we don't lose a lot of people. But, you know, as we bring on new people, you know, they go into the star chamber and with the partners and, you know, it's like a rotating thing and people are in and out and they're asking the same questions that you ask. And, you know, when I'm like the third or fourth group that goes in, I'm like, all right, I'm sure you've answered these questions already, but if you wouldn't mind, you know, okay, and go through all that stuff. But I also offer and many times pursue the prospect to let them know kind of what I see as that person's future themselves, where I see them within the practice group, where I see them within the office, where I see them within the firm, to make sure that, you know, we are all moving towards the same thing. Because if they are not moving towards where we are moving, either in the small group, meaning department, office, the larger group, the firm, moving in that direction, if there's a misalignment, then it's not going to be successful. And that person is going to be updating their resume, you know, a few months down the road. And so, but knowing what that is that you're moving towards and assuring the person that you're interviewing that you're not running away from something is, I think, important. And also, not just for recruiting, but also, you know, we've talked about the culture of your businesses and what are you doing to nurture that. And so if, you know, sharing what your vision is for 2024 moving forward, it goes a long way. And it may be that, okay, you're not asking for, in some cases, you may be asking for input and say, okay, what do you think about this? In some cases, you may not want input. You may not want input from certain individuals and maybe from, yes, you do from others. But, you know, having that buy-in and having that culture of moving in the same direction. So, you know, as you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that, you know, we could unpack that so much, but so I'll stop here by saying that, okay, you know, that concept of moving towards something needs to be, you know, joint, whether you're in a buy-sell situation, buying or selling is the best case scenario. If it's not an investor purchase, but also operationally moving forward, if you're not on the market to buy or sell.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, kind of the couple tests for me in terms of, you know, too much dependence upon the owner is that if I, as a business owner, have not been able to take 2 contiguous weeks off, like 2 back-to-back weeks off, completely disconnected, you know, meaning like I'm not doing 2 contiguous weeks off that are called Adam's Families at the beach while I'm back at the house actually getting work done, taking Zoom. I'm talking like real time off, you know, like, you know, no phone, you know, kind of time off. If you can't do that, how is Jack, as the buyer, ever supposed to believe that, oh, this place will totally run without me? You'll be fine. it'll be good. Like, I'm totally unnecessary. Team's great. I mean, that's like red flag number one, red flag number two. And I'd ask your opinion on this one, Jack. How many times have you seen this one go well? Hey, we're ready to do some diligence. Who from your team should we loop in? Kind of as the buyer side, you're sort of expecting that to be a team of 2 to 3 beyond just the owner, meaning like CFO, maybe HR director, COO, kind of trust lieutenant, right-hand person. And the answer is no one, just me. I'll get you what you need.
Yeah, I mean that's problematic for two big reasons. One is the obvious, which is okay, one man show, one person show, but also what is that person hiding that they don't want to tell anybody else? So they are very much controlling the information and what is getting out there, and no one else knows. And so, that all kinds of red flags for a number of reasons. But I'll give you an example in the franchise context. So business owner wants to franchise. I've actually talked, not many, because that would be, counterproductive to business and billing clients hours, but I have talked to individuals out of becoming franchisors and saying, you're not quite ready. And the main reasons typically are that the business is too reliant upon them, that they are not going to be successful in replicating that business model and handing it over to a total stranger to operate as a franchise. And then, so, it needs that person. The other is that if they are a control freak, and that, when you are basically saying, here is a package of how to run a business, give it to them in exchange for many thousands of dollars and say, all right, go forth and do well and don't screw it up. You have to take that leap of faith with them. And a person who's a control freak can't do that. Similarly, the analogy is, if you are always having to be, let me take this differently. If you are not able to take a 2-week vacation, it's your fault, because you have not put in place the parameters and the team and the structure to allow you to do that. I am guilty of that. If the very few times that I've taken more than 10 days off, it has never, ever, ever been completely off the grid. Even when years ago, when you're on a cruise ship and it costs you like $50 a megabyte to transmit data back and forth, I was still doing a little bit of work when everyone else was sleeping. So I'm guilty of that. So I'm being, I guess I am telling you to do something that I myself am not good at doing, but you need to be able to create the environment where you can walk away and demonstrate that you can walk away for a period of time. To Adam's point, we're doing due diligence and it's one person, and it's just going to go down the toilet if that person is not involved. That is a problem. Now, I will say, from a buyer's perspective, yeah, that's a problem. But what that translates to is, all right, we believe that we can do it better than you, but we're only going to pay you for what you got. We're not going to pay you on the upswing of the business in our hands, because we're going to have to hustle very hard to create this structure and this infrastructure that you should already have in your business. So we're going to pay you for being a one-person shop, essentially, but we're going to have to spend time building this machine to bring it into something greater than you have it. And so, but we're not going to pay you that value. Whereas if you had that in place, then you're going to get paid for that value. If you have the right people in place, you're certainly going to get paid for the fact that, okay, your GM staying on board, that you have all these things in place, your financials are in good order. So, it's basically, you're doing it to yourself if you don't have that in place. So hate to be harsh about it, but that's just the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you, Jack.
Hence the triple the value of your company if you do these things, if you address these. One other thing that I'm going to jump in. So I know we're going to have to do next week already because we aren't gonna get through all 7. So next week we'll do the remainder, and we will put in for everybody that shows up, we'll put in a link so that you can get the ebook. And I think we're gonna do it for free, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So but one other little thing so a little bonus, 2 books, and Damon Burton, we just interviewed him yesterday for the podcast, and I think he's gonna be debuting in December or January, but he is the best SEO, search engine optimization guru on the planet that I've ever found. And I'm extremely skeptical of anything in the marketing world just because I was in that world. But he now has 60 people, and that's all they do. So it's not just like him, the wizard. He's got 60, which is very unusual for that kind of a niche world in the marketing world. But he said 2 things that were really critical for him to be able to scale. And he's turned down multiple big offers for his company. He's like, nah, I'm having too much fun. E-Myth Revisited. And he said the whole point of that book was business is built on processes, not people. Process, right? So he said, read them in this order. E-Myth Revisited. And then the second one, the 4-hour work week, is how do you compress time? Those 2 things, like those 2 books are really good, but he said, read them in that order. But I thought, man, that's really good, because I wanted to know, how have you scaled? Because most people in that world, in the marketing world, they can't scale because they have to be the great white hope of, hey, I'm the man, I'm the big brain around here. And that's not the case. And so anyway, just to accentuate point number 3.
Yeah, you hit it. So do you want me to keep going with number 4, or we want to?
I would say we're at a pretty good stopping point. So what we'll do is we'll call this 3.5.
Yeah, good. You hit 3.5. Read those books.
Read those books.
Yeah.
And give us a teaser what the 4th one is.
Yeah, so the 4th one is actually a little bit, if the business is too dependent upon the owner, the 4th one is you probably have an ineffective management team.
Oh.
So that's number 4. So we'll go into depth on management and governance in addition to the other 3 when we do this next week.
All right, cool. So at 3.5, and we can't really advertise that because Jeffrey Gitomer has a trademark on that, and it's fully defensible. Any book that he has is something 0.5, 10.5 reasons, or 6, whatever, 5.5. And I said, hey, can I use that on what I was writing my book? And he's like, no, I love you, but no. Go 7. I said, okay, because I had 6 weapons. Anyway, let's see. Hold on here. Just got another Tom. Oh, okay, I'll read it. Guys, you're using words and descriptions that make a business owner sound like a criminal or an idiot, control freak, hiding something. Many of the business owners you and I deal with are not trained or schooled in business management. Very true. We're not trying to make people feel like an idiot or control freak. One area that they suffer from is financial reporting. I think it's unfair to make these statements. Hey, we appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. And if we're coming across like we're the great white hope and we know everything, forgive us, Tom, because that is not the case. And I have been in that shoe. I've been in those shoes 4 times. So and I actually did have a partner that was a criminal.
Yeah. And I think to that point, to unpack that in 2 different parts, so I do appreciate the comment, Tom. The financial reporting, like there's on the one hand, like not understanding the fundamentals of a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet and a statement of cash flows, that's understandable. That's not easy. I mean, we've got some people that actually have accounting degrees that still struggle with how to do a cash flow statement, even though that's one of the 3 fundamental documents of don't tell anybody I said that, Gary. That's okay. That's excusable. Like not wanting to look at them, because you've got other stuff that you look at. that's okay, that's excusable. So really what I'm hitting with is like I believe it is so unimportant that I'm not going to invest anything at all, you know, in that area, you know, meaning like I'm not getting, you know, like I'm not going to actually even have, you know, an accounting file, or I do have an accounting file, but I'm not going to care, you know, whether or not it's actually accurate. So I'm really separating out you know, or I'm not going to, you know, if I'm not going to be passionate about it, to go back to the 4-hour work week, if it's in my wither zone, I'm not going to pay anybody to have it be right, because I so view it as unimportant. I'm willing to do nothing about it. Like, I don't need financial statements to run my business. I will not do financial statements to run my business. It's that person that I'm addressing with this topic, you know, not the, man, I don't know how to read them. You know, Gary,
Yeah.
could you show me how to read them and like what I should be
Yeah.
Those questions we love all day long.
Yeah.
You know, it's so unimportant. I know you have to do it, but go to hell, and I want to spend the least amount possible on it because it's dumb. And I don't care. That's the point that those are the people that we're really addressing. I think the control freak, you know, that's a tough one, you know, because I think that's a negative connotation, you know, of the positive version, which may be, you know, passionate, you know, and it really kind of comes down to, am I willing to be self-aware enough that I'm willing to train somebody on a process and delegate and allow them to make their own mistakes? Or am I just going to be that guy that says, well, how did you not know, Gary?
Yeah.
Why didn't you, Gary? Well, Gary didn't know because I never freaking told him.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, we all know. So I agree, you know, there's not good management training out there. You're absolutely right, Tom. I absolutely agree. You know, shameless plug for Tom. Tom is a Vistage chair, which is the CEO of Peer Organization. And if you feel like you are symptomatic of that issue, you should call Tom, because he can help you fix these problems, you know, as being a CEO coach himself. But I think it really kind of comes down to, we all know how we want to be treated and how we should treat other people. So, you know, the people that we're really addressing is, you know, the people that know better and want to seek, like, hey, how can I make that better? Like, I want to not be, you know, a person who has to be in the details of everything. You know, how do I get better? Versus like, no, you know, it is going to have to be exactly my way, including, Gary, I don't like your writing. I believe it should be cursive. And I'm mad at you now, even though I never told you that it should be cursive.
It's
Yeah.
all print.
Yeah. So it's really that, you know, in other words, like, you probably, to give Tom the benefit of the doubt, you know, if I've gone beyond, you know, 5-7 employees, you know, there's a pretty good chance that while I may have some control freak tendencies, I'm not one. If I haven't been able to get above 5 to 7 and I'm constantly turning people over, I mean, you kind of got to maybe take a look at that mirror and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest things, I think, for an entrepreneur to do, is to be able to relinquish the control or certain things to people that are not going to be as good or as proficient or as fast as what you're doing. And man, I had to learn that at 28 on my first turnaround. You know, it was just me and my partner after everybody quit, and we took 20% pay cuts to keep the doors open. And then as we were scaling, we could only afford to hire people younger than me and that were willing to get paid less than market at the time, as we were coming out of what should have been bankruptcy of my partner. But that was a hard thing. But what I learned was the freedom in being able to do that and really celebrate the unique perspectives of other people. I just had to get really clear on, what does success look like, not how do you create it. And in the creative world, that's very subjective. So anyway, this is really good discussion. Thank you, Tom, for chiming in. And Derek, always good to have you on here too.
Hey,
Next
Gary,
week,
I know we're out of
Yep.
time, but to Tom, I also appreciate Tom's comment. And when we say things, we have, history in our mind of things that happen. I could tell you many times where you have a one person owner that is very successful and can do it all, or understands and appreciates. And the reason why there's a sale transaction is because they understand and appreciate what needs to happen, but they don't want to do it because, maybe they're like, okay, I'm close to retirement. I don't need to be the one that moves this to the next level as far as a business goes. So I would also say that, when I was saying those things, I was speaking of the arrogant person, or, the dismissive person owner who is just basically putting their head in the sand and saying, so, okay, I have to do everything because I am so important to the business, and not the person that's saying, okay, I have to do this because, this is the way the business has survived, but I know I'm sort of over my head. So something else has to happen. So those are the things that we're talking about. So again, apologies for, they're both sides to, we can give you as many stories on either side. So I just want to make that clear.
Yep.
Yeah, I think last thing I'll hit on in terms of the gate is that if I generally have a pit in my stomach when I'm dealing with employee issues, or like when I come in and like what's going to be wrong, like if I don't feel good, there's a good chance that the problem may be me, and maybe I am, a control freak. If I'm angry all the time. If on the other side, man, I'm like zippity frickin' doodah, living in a state of nirvana, even if I want things done my way and I'm passionate about it, I probably am not, because I feel like I feel like the
Good
judgment comes out based on the person's language and attitude about, about things. Like you can just kind of tell, Jack's point, you can tell the people that are passionate versus the people that are like, no, you just got a real problem with control, because that's the same exact person that like, is telling their kids exactly, how to lay out the clothes in the morning, and like, wife has to pay bills a certain, like it shows up in other spots in their lives.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Anybody that came on late, we had a nice crew with us again today. So thank you for taking time out of your day. If you came in late and want to see the front end of this thing, we'll have it posted up later on this afternoon on the BGW CPA YouTube channel. And so next week, we know what we're going to be covering. 3.5, the remaining 3.5. Will, thank you for saying thank you. We appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of the week and a good weekend. See you.
Thanks. Bye.